Okay, hi and hello. I'm Erin, your friendly teen services librarian for the Worcester Public Library. And for this week's Tutorial Tuesday for both our Instagram and for our YouTube, I am going to be interviewing a friend of mine, a author named Natalie Johanson. She is the author of Shadow's Voice, which we have in the youth collection. I have known Natalie for about 4 years. She's been a good friend for a while, and I'm very proud of her for being able to have become a published author. So I thought it'd be really interesting to talk to her about her whole process of getting into writing and how she writes, and just some interesting stories about being not only a writer but also a police officer. So I'm going to be interviewing her about her whole process, especially because I have heard that some people are treating April and potentially May as sort of a NaNoWriMo style, so National Novel Writing Month, which does happen in November. But since people are quarantined, I know a lot of people have actually been thinking about doing just a general novel writing month to see if they can write, I think it's 75,000 words, 50,000, I can't remember. I have never been able to do it myself. I've tried. But there are people out there who are trying and who might like some input from an actual author. So stay tuned for my interview with Natalie Johanson of Shadow's Voice. So I am interviewing today my friend Natalie Johanson, who is the author of Shadow's Voice, which we currently have in the teen collection. We do not have it in the adult collection, but there's a physical copy in the YA collection, and it should be in ebook form on Overdrive as well. So, hi Natalie, how's your day been?
That's good. How are you?
I'm good. So Natalie, while not also being a author, she is also a police officer. Why don't you tell me what your whole thing is?
Sure. So I've been a cop for about 4 years. I actually just passed my 4-year mark. I currently work as a CID detective, which means I handle any crisis intervention stuff. So anything with like a mental health aspect, victim or suspect, those cases come to me.
Cool. But so essentially, Shadow's Voice is it's a high fantasy style novel in about the YA to adult range, about a girl named Rose who is on the run from her past. She has a specific power that allows her to move through the shadows, which has been used for bad things in her past, which she's trying to get away from. But every single time she tries to get away from it, it keeps drawing her back in because someone else finds a way to use her or utilize her, and she's forced to constantly on the run until she gets caught up in a conspiracy to try to kill the king without even realizing it. And it's got a lot of very great action, a lot of awesome character and world building. The magic system is really very innovative. As a person who reads a lot of fantasy novels, I really found this one to be a breath of fresh air. And I'm not just saying that because, I'm her friend. I actually legitimately liked it and had a blast reading the novel. And I think I handed it to about almost all my coworkers and said, please read this. You will love it. Oh my God, read it. And I've gotten a couple of my teens to read it, and they've said they loved it. So it was obviously a hit. But you also come from a small publisher, so that's an interesting thing to be dealing with.
Yeah.
Because you started off, you were self-published, and then you moved to a publisher.
Yeah. So I was Yeah, the first time it was published, Shadow's Voice, it was a whole debacle. It was pitched by the owner as being an actual publisher, and then turns out it was just a printing press. So a lot of things that I expected to happen didn't happen. But yeah, so I pulled it from that publisher, and now it's with a small press indie publisher that's actually based here in Utah, which is cool because I've met the owner, and that's kind of fun. So yeah, so it's like a small indie publisher, so I retain all my rights, but they did all the legwork and did all the editing and the cover design and got it an ISBN and placed in the bookstores and stuff. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. I like it.
Yeah. And so is it mostly just in Salt Lake, or has it been distributed across the or is it just across the nation through online sales?
So it's cross nation through online sales. It's available online with Barnes and Noble and then Amazon. There's print and the ebook version. Barnes and Noble, you have to, because it's called a print-on-demand type of publisher, so they only print per orders received. So Barnes and Noble traditionally won't carry those kind of publishers in store for reasons. But you can go into Barnes and Noble and request it, and they will order it in store for you, and then you can pick it up that way, or you can just order it from Amazon, which is a little easier.
Nice. So tell me about your writing process. Like, I personally know your writing process. I've seen you going through it, but it's always interesting to hear how people have their own styles and what they go through.
My writing process is like a chaotic disaster. There's no rhyme or reason to it at all. So what I try to do is, I write on a typewriter, like an old school manual typewriter, because I have a bad habit of going back and editing things to death, because I'm a perfectionist and what I write will never be good enough. And so if I type it on the typewriter, pull the page out, and then put it page like front down, I don't see it anymore, and I won't edit it to death and freak out over it. So I will type everything out of my typewriter, and I kind of just write what comes to me by the seat of my pants. I tried to like plot things out, and it ended up hurting me more than helping me, because I would get off on like random tangents, and then my plot was changing more than my plot graph was allowing it to, and so I just kind of write as the muse lets me write, and eventually it creates a stack of papers that looks like a book, and then I will type all of that into my computer, and then I'll do like a round of editing as that's happening, and then I edit it further from the computer. Is the nutshell of my chaotic disaster of a writing style.
So how long did it take you to write Shadow's Voice, to get from like the start of like, I'm going to not even like sit down and write a book, but I'm just going to sit down and get this thing in my head out, to when you handed it to your publisher, or when you decided to start doing your publishing part?
Probably from the start of I'm going to write a thing to the thing is now published, probably like 10 years. There was a big gap in between there where I kind of just was like, screw it, and gave up and didn't. And so about 10 years from like this is going to happen to published, about 5 years to like I'm going to make a concentrated effort to finish it and get it published, about 5.
Wow.
Ish.
And what sparked you to want to write this? Because I know everyone always says, you have a book inside you, but like, what was your spark? What was the thing that made you decide, okay, I actually want to write?
So my spark was, I was reading my favorite series ever. I still read the series, and I finished book 2. I think it was book 2. I finished book 2, and the ending, I did not agree with the ending. I was very upset that 2 characters did not get together that I wanted to get back together, and so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to write my own ending. And so I started writing what is now fanfic. I didn't realize at the time that's what fanfic was. I think this was actually before fanfic was a thing. But I was writing fanfic, and then I had a whole bunch, and I got to this point where I was like, I'm writing this entire thing that I'll never be able to publish. That's like a lot of effort for nothing. And so I came up with a whole story of something that I could write and get published and put it on my shelf next to the series. And that's what started it. And then I gave up for a while because I really didn't know what I was doing. And then I came up with a good plot and a good character and conflict, and that's what became Shadow's Voice.
Nice. So one thing that I hear a lot from like a lot of the teens that I know, right? They'll tell me, oh, like I just, school, work, social life, I cannot get myself to write. Or they'll sit down and they'll write and they'll be like, oh, this is so like whatever, I don't like this, and they'll stop. Do you ever have to deal with that? Do you ever get caught in that?
Oh, sure. Life is very busy. I mean, I work as a detective. I work 40 hours a week, and that oftentimes rolls into 50 or 60 hours a week, depending on what happens. So finding time in general to write is very hard. I usually try to make a concentrated effort to write on my one for sure day off, which is Friday for me. Friday's my day off. So I try to write on Friday. I also just struggle sometimes with motivation to write. I'm not one of those persons that can sit down and be like, just write, and then something eventually will happen out of it. When I do that, usually the something that happens out of it is trash, and I end up not using any of it. So I try to write when the muse is telling me to write, and when I have that like motivation. There have been long dry spells where I don't write at all for a long time, and when that happens, I'll usually pick up my favorite book and try to read it, or I'll just reread stuff that I've written to try to find that flow from where I was when I stopped earlier. But a lot of times I just have to remember that I'm writing it for me at the end of the day, and so I write what I want to write and what makes me happy.
How do you go out like plotting out a plot? Like, do you sit down and think, I'm just going to sit down and write straight through, or do you write out like different things and kind of like knit them together?
I have a general idea of main events I want to happen. Like I have key conversations I know I want to have, and I have key things like big main plot points I want to have happen. The rest of it, I just kind of fly by the seat of my pants and write, and hopefully I can find a way to connect those things. I'm not good at like really structured plot graphing. Like there's some apps that I've seen that are like freaking webs of monstrosities that look amazing, but I can't I can't do those. So outside of like the key points and key character plots that I want to have happen, I just kind of write and see what happens. Like this, like book 2, prime example. I think I've rewritten the middle part of it 3 or 4 times. I keep changing what I think I want to happen changes. And so I keep rewriting it. But I still have my main key points that I want to have happen, like the main baddie fight, the main conversations between my 2 main characters. Those don't change, just how they get there changes.
No. Do you ever get sad when you have to get rid of like a conversation that you really loved?
Yes, so bad. There's a couple that I really should get rid of because they don't actually do anything for the plot. They don't forward the plot at all. But I like them, and a lot of them end up going into a folder of bits not used is how I've titled it, and I try really hard to figure out where I can put those in other sections. But yes, there are plenty of scenes that I've removed, and I cried a little for them.
So I just realized this because you tend to get like a lot of like, I've gotten text from you being like, well, what do I do with this? And I know that you probably talked to Adrienne, your wife, about this as well. And it's like, do you ever get caught between what you want to do and like what the people that like are your fans and your friends are saying, like, oh, like, you know how much I love one very specific character, and I tell you I want more of her. But like, does that ever come into play? Like in your
more of her.
Thank you. You don't
welcome.
understand. So good. But anyway, but like, does that ever come into play though? Like with you saying like, oh, I'm going to give you more of her. Like, do you ever think about like your friends and your family and the people that you talk to about your book?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That's why reviews are so important. Even the ones where they're not nice are important because there's a reason they didn't like the book. And if it's a character or if it's a writing style, you're not going to please everyone. Get over it. And try not to pay too much attention to that. But like if there's a consistent theme, like the character that you like, there was a consistent theme of people talking about how they really enjoyed this character and they wanted more of her. And I enjoyed writing her character. And in my head, she's one of my favorite characters. I just did not realize how little screen time she got. And so I made an effort to give her more screen time because she's a very integral character. I just forgot to write those parts. So I have conversations all the time between you and Adrienne and the reviews. Like that's how I work out kinks in my plot. Like I know how it's supposed to work in my head, but if I do this, this, and this, will it make sense in your head? And so I take a lot of that feedback and I sculpt it into what I think needs to happen and what the readers are expecting, and sometimes not expecting, but will appreciate all the time. So like I completely delete the character.
Do you ever like worry about like fan service? Because you know, like there's people who yell at J.K. Rowling or other authors who are just like, well, that was just fan service. You just did this because the fans yelled. It's like, do you ever think of it like that, or is it more just like, no, this is a collaborative effect, like thing?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, you still need to read. You need to write something people want to read, or else they're never going to read it, right? So to some extent, yeah, it's a little bit of fan service, but it's also creating a product that makes sense. Like, for your like prime example, back to the character that you really like, I'm not adding more scenes of her for fan service. You pointed out a good point that I had missed, and she now plays a more integral role in the second book because she's just important. There's a reason she's an advisor to the king. There's a reason she's a captain. There's a reason that she's important. You just get to see it now because I forgot that you can't always see what's in my head. And then on the flip side, there's also just giving the readers everything they want. Like, I love J.K. Rowling, but get off of Twitter. Not everything needs a deep, dark backstory and explanation. And sometimes it was just a fun typo. Like, leave it alone. So I think it's a balance. You just have to maintain between giving the readers something they want to read and giving them what they want.
But like the thing that like I always think about with you is that you come in with this really interesting background where like some authors are just people who have written, but you actually have like this background in, you know, having to deal with people as well as also having to go through like fights, and you write fight scenes very well. And does that come from your like, yeah, no, you write them incredibly well, don't worry. I've read some authors that like looking being like, have you ever been punched in the face? Like,
I know
like how hard it is to come back from being punched in the face. So like, but like the nice thing is with, yeah, like with you though, with like if Rose gets hit, like she actually reacts, and so it's nice to see that kind of reaction in a character. And I like wonder how much of like your work that you do, like your day job, comes into your like your writing life.
No, for sure. A good example is in the fight scenes. So we go through training that we have for some ground fighting and like wrestling and kind of stuff. So when I do fight scenes, I try really hard to act them out. So like, because the body moves in very specific ways. Like if you throw a punch with your right hand, your left shoulder is going to come back. And if you kick somebody, your hips are going to move. So I try really hard when I write the fight scenes to write them in a way that would make sense for what the body's already doing naturally so that they flow better. And then with people and with characters, I like to pretend that I'm a professional people watcher. So what, in my mind, what makes a really good character is one that's super flawed and imperfect, but in a way that does not care about the plot. Like, Rose has a lot of flaws, and a lot of those flaws really have nothing to do with the plot. Like, it doesn't further the plot. In some points, her flaws actually hinder the plot, like if she would just make better decisions.
Yes.
But
yes, if she would just make better decisions.
Yes, and you know exactly what I'm talking about, and which is funny because that's a point that a lot of reviewers have digged me on. That they're like, she makes a really dumb decision, and her life would have been easier if she had done this. Sure, but we don't get to go through life with 20/20 hindsight. We make really stupid decisions for really bad reasons sometimes. Like, not every decision we make as a human being is the good decision, but like for the wrong, like, you know, like the ends justify the means kind of thing. Like, not everything is that deep. Sometimes we just screw up. And so having characters that screw up organically, I think, in my opinion, is what makes really good characters. So I try to write in flaws that people have. Like, Rose has got a lot of my flaws in her. And if you can write and make characters that have those broken parts to them that everybody has, I think they come across as more three-dimensional, realistic.
Yeah, like that is an interesting thing, because you do see like a lot of, like, I love YA, but I always also know that YA tends to have characters who make really yeah, they can make really dumb decisions, and you just want to yell at them. But it's also like, the thing you have to realize is they make dumb decisions because think back how many times you've made really dumb decisions.
Yeah, they make dumb decisions because they're still kind of dumb. Like, that's what being a young adult is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's just, it's, and like with fantasy, when you throw that in, you get a slightly even, like, the stakes are even higher, because now, like, people who can come through the shadows with, like, daggers are involved. Like, it just, that makes it feel like you should allow people more of a chance to be, like, make really bad decisions sometimes. But it can also be infuriating as a writer to read it, because you're screaming at them being like, why are you not listening to me? Do you ever have moments where like, your characters get away from you like that?
Yes. Oh, yes, all the times. Like, I'm writing, like, in my head, I pictured Rose in a very different emotional state in the beginning of book 2. And so I started writing her that way. And then as I was rereading it towards the end, I was like, you're in a completely different emotional state than I expected you to be in. And so I had to switch how she was in the beginning, because I just wrote her differently and it flowed better than what I expected her to be.
Mm-hmm.
She took kind of like her on a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's the interesting thing, that like my young writers, my teen writers, people who really want to, you know, see their book on a shelf one day should like realize is that, you know, it's not going to come out perfect the first time, not even the second or the third, and your characters are going to fight you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And oh yeah, many much editing. For sure. Many much editing. It will never be perfect. Even when your editor says, yes, that's good, you're still not going to think it's perfect. I have a really hard time rereading my first book because I notice things where I'm like, should have fixed that, but I can't, you know. So expect it to never be perfect, and never expect it. You never want it to be perfect. Like if you think you can never fix it and make it better, then you've missed the point of being a growing author.
Mm-hmm. So we're pretty much at the end of the time. I mean, I could literally keep going, but like, we both have things. We have lives. We have things to do. You have to like go back to, you know, being important and doing things. Detecting things. But do you have any like parting wisdom, parting words for writers who, you know, are struggling to even like pick up the pencil and like start their novel that they've been sitting and stewing on in their head for like years?
Yeah, my advice would be to figure out why you want to write, and then write for that reason. Like, I wanted to write because I wanted to have a book that was covered and bound with my name on it, with my own story next to my favorite series. Whether or not it becomes a big hit stiller is never going to be part of my goals. I wanted it to be published so that I could say, I made this. So that's why I write. And anything that comes after that is just extra. So figure out why you want to write, and then write towards that goal. So if you want to write because you want to be the next J.K. Rowling, good luck to you. Also, work towards that goal then. Then do all your research, do your writing classes, write. But then at the end of the day, just remember you have to do it for you, regardless of what somebody else tells you.
I like that. Now I have one thing. You never held up the cover of your book. Also, I want to ask you for recommendations. So there we have their Shadow's Voice. Like I said, it's in my collection. And then you actually, once again, should pick it up. Please read it. It's wonderful. And also leave reviews, because that's really important. Yeah, it's also really important to authors to leave reviews.
Yes, even if your review is, I didn't like it because, leave the review, because reviews are everything to authors. They give us validation when they're good, and they give us something to work on when they're bad. So even if your review is simply, I didn't like it because A, B, and C, still leave that review. Reviews are gold to us.
Now, do you have a book you want to recommend, a book or two?
I have 3.
Okay.
This is the first
time you're not running to the shelf this time.
I know. I prepared. I prepared this time. So, yes. A Great and Terrible Beauty is one of my all-time favorite trilogies. I'm really sad it's just a trilogy. I wish that she had continued. But this is like so sad. But this is like Jane Austen, but with magic. So I just freaking love this series so much. Jane Austen with magic. That's this one.
Yeah, and that's by Libba Bray. We do have her books in the YA collection. I know we have them on ebook, so if you want to, you can pick up the series. I recommend it. I love anything by Libba Bray. I love her novel Beauty Queens, which is not magic, but is just as good. So yeah, absolutely check that out.
Fantastic book. And then the Throne of Glass series. This one is floating around on the interwebs many times. It's very popular lately. I think it's because the covers are pretty dope, so that it makes for good book blog photos. But Throne of Glass, it's got like fairies and magic and assassins and cool fight scenes. So Throne of Glass series by Sarah Maas. That's one. And then the other one is the one that started it all. This is the series. The series that got me into reading and into writing. It's the Green Rider series by Kristen Brighton. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She's working on her 7th book right now, so it's still an active series. It isn't finished. So if you're one of those persons that only starts finished series, then look away. But fantastic series. It's got like king's messengers and ancient evil magic people from the past and kings and romance and angst, and I love it so much. Also, look at that cover. Isn't that the coolest cover ever?
It's a fun cover.
I like
yeah. Well, thank you, Natalie, for letting me interview you and dealing with all our technical issues, because, you know, this is what we do now.
This is what we do now.
I know. But, so to anyone from Worcester Public Library who sees this, I once again recommend that you read Shadow's Voice by Natalie Johanson. Like I said, it's in the teen collection. And there is an ebook version. I don't have it. I haven't purchased it yet, but I'm going to, because we're doing big ebook purchasing right now.
It's free on Kindle Unlimited.
And it is free on Kindle Unlimited, but we always recommend that you support your local libraries. But yeah, also...
I always do that too.
always do that. But yeah, no, check out, if you cannot wait for the library to reopen and to put it on hold, then I would absolutely recommend checking it out on like your ebook app, see what you can find. But yeah, so I'm going to now go and edit this and put it up, so we'll get your face on the intro up soon.
Yay!
But yeah, okay. Thank you again, Natalie. I really appreciate it.
Yep.